thiết kế và triển khai Wi-Fi Aruba ngoài trời do anh Robert Lyon, giám đốc kỹ thuật Aruba khu vực châu Á Thái Bình Dương. Và như thường lệ, anh Nam Anh và anh Ngô Toàn Thắng sẽ summary lại các ý chính từ anh Robert ạ. Và phần tiếp theo sẽ là máy chủ HDE và giải pháp lưu trữ cho ngành khách sạn, sẽ do anh Nguyễn Văn Phương, kỹ sư tư vấn cao cấp HDE Việt Nam, một đại diện mới xuất hiện trong ngày hôm nay, trong buổi hội thảo chúng ta ngày hôm nay. Dạ, hello anh Phương ơi, anh có thể say hello với mọi người được không ạ?
Những người anh Phương mới 3 giờ mới vào nên em cứ tiếp tục nhé.
Dạ rồi, em cảm ơn. Vậy chúng ta sẽ gặp lại anh Phương sau. Dạ vâng ạ. Và em cũng hy vọng với những thông tin được chia sẻ trong chương trình sẽ giúp ích cho các anh chị. Và một lần nữa em cũng xin gửi lời cảm ơn đặc biệt đến toàn thể quý khách hàng đã và đang dành thời gian quý báu của mình đồng hành cùng với chúng tôi suốt 3 buổi hội thảo này. Và em cũng xin nhắc lại, trong buổi hội thảo diễn ra thì anh chị có thể click vào phần Q&A trên giao diện Zoom để đặt câu hỏi bất cứ lúc nào và để nhận được giải đáp từ diễn giả. Và không để các quý anh chị đợi lâu nữa, chúng ta sẽ đến với nội dung chính của buổi đào tạo ngày hôm nay. Và sau đây kính mời anh Robert, giám đốc kỹ thuật Aruba khu vực châu Á Thái Bình Dương chia sẻ ạ. Please, Mr. Robert.
Hi, okay. Let me share my screen. All right, you guys can see my screen?
Yes, I see.
All right, cool. Let me just change my pointer here. All right, so a very good afternoon, guys. So today is day 3, and today is the last day where we're going to cover outdoor design and best practices. So in day 1, just to give you a bit of recap, right? Day 1, we covered our vision for hospitality, our architecture for hotels, all right? And then we talked about the products, right? The Wi-Fi 680s and the switches. And then yesterday, we talked about best practices. We talked about site survey, pre and post site survey, and some recommendations. And also we talk about Wi-Fi 6, how will it benefit you and your customer? And today in day 3, we're going to cover on outdoor APs. How do you deploy outdoor mesh, right? Point-to-point coverage for outdoors, and how do you do multiple hop-site mesh, right? So let's get things started. And as usual, post all your questions on the Q&A box, and then I'll get back to you. So with that, let's get started. Now, as today's topic is outdoor, there are many variables in outdoor. It's not as straightforward as indoor. Now, in outdoor, you need to take note of this term called the Fresnel zone, right? Which I'm going to cover later what is it about. But essentially, that means that when you do a point-to-point to interconnect two buildings, there needs to be some clearance in between, right? You must be a line of sight, clear line of sight. Now, when you put outdoor APs, especially for the garden area or near the beach, right? Trees is an RF killer because all those, the branches, the trees, the leaf, those can block RF, right? Those can block RF. So as sometimes, right, the tree can be very small, but as the tree grows through seasonal changes so on, right, it can block the Wi-Fi signal. So take note of all those environment variables. And next up, buildings, right? So when you deploy outdoor Wi-Fi, take note of your surrounding buildings. Have a look around the area where you want to put your APs, because building being is concrete will block your outdoor signal. So just take note of that. Now, some other radio frequency variables, right? So cross-pole antenna, very important. When you want to do outdoor Wi-Fi, especially point-to-point, use a cross-polarized antenna. So Aruba outdoor APs are cross-polarized. And what I meant by cross-polarized is that the antenna signal sends out signal horizontally and vertically, all right? So I'm going to cover one slide on that, so don't worry too much about it right now. Interference. Now, when you do point-to-point outdoors, again, look around the area, check out the surrounding area, right? If there are radio towers or other tower, radio towers, cellular network towers, those towers, if it's too near to your AP, it can and potentially block your signal, right? It can block the signal. If your power is too strong, it will cause adjacent channel interference. So just take note of your environment. If it's a very dense RF environment, maybe a narrower antenna can improve, right, that performance. And what I mean by narrow antenna is how narrow the degree of antenna is. So we have outdoor APs with up to 30 by 30 degrees, which is pretty narrow. So just take note of that. Now, in terms of mesh, point to point, very important. What is the distance? How far is it from one point to another point? So the further you go, the bandwidth drops. And not just that, you need to take note of the clearance. It must be a clear line of sight. Also, just take note of it, all right? Check the signal to noise ratio. If it's a very long link, make sure you put max power, right? Just to make sure that you get better bandwidth. Now, alignment, because when you do point to point, you need to do alignment from both points to connect each other over the mesh link. And typically, rather, I wouldn't use the word typically, but we always use the 5 gigahertz radio for mesh, right? Never 2.4. 2.4 is just too congested. And our highest gain antenna, right, the most narrow is 30 by 30 degrees, right, which you can use. And then you can use your eye, right, to do that alignment. Just look at it. If you need to do vertical alignment, you need to use a declinometer, right, just to do that vertical alignment. In general, most time eye alignment is good enough. Now, what is Fresnel zone? Right, we talk about it. So Fresnel zone is, so these are 2 point-to-point APs, right? 2 mesh point-to-point APs. And then this is the Fresnel zone. It's the shape like an American football or maybe a rugby ball, right? If you're familiar with it, it's a shape, it's an oval shape. So this, right, needs to have full clearance, right? It must be cleared. It must be, need to have full clearance. Like for example, if it's on top of a building, it needs to be full clearance. Because when you do Wi-Fi point-to-point, right, it's not, the signal is not like a laser where you just shoot straight. It's not like that. It's actually an oval shape, right? The signal will propagate in an oval shape. So the R, which is the Fresnel zone, you need to have this clearance. If you have obstacle within this R, which is in the middle part, right? In the Fresnel zone, it's actually in the middle part. You will high chance is that your mesh link cannot be formed. Even if it can be formed, the performance will be very, very bad. So a site survey is very, very important. So, right, so the Fresnel zone is the maximum halfway across the link, which is this R here. Right. In case there are trees, right, or buildings, the performance will drop. Maybe the link cannot even form. So, and this is an absolute requirement, right? You cannot negotiate this because this is how it works, all right? Wi-Fi point-to-point is not a laser beam that you can just shoot laser and then a straight line and it works. It doesn't work that way. Though we always say line of sight, but it's actually the signal is actually oval shaped. So remember, Fresnel zone, right, is the R, the midway point, and it needs to be clear with no obstacles. So these are some guidelines that you can use. For example, if it's over 5 miles of distance, the Fresnel zone, the R, right, you need to be 52 feet. This needs to be 52 feet of clearance. I'm giving you an example. Now, in terms of environmental concerns, one thing that we are very concerned about outdoors is trees, right? Today, you deploy Wi-Fi, maybe the tree is very small, but maybe 3-4 years later, the tree grew and became very big and start to block Wi-Fi, right? We've seen that happen. So just take note of that because all the trees, the leaf can, all the moisture content of the trees can actually block RF and make the coverage very, very bad. So in a highly forested area, just be careful. It can be a benefit as well because maybe you want to constrain the RF from certain areas. So it can actually improve AP to IP isolation. But if you want to cover a large area, probably it will not work because all the trees, the water in the tree, the moisture, the leaf will actually block signal. As you can see here, if it's point to point, make sure it's above the trees. Try not to mount AP. If you're aiming it down, do not do it with the trees blocking you. So try, one way is to try to put it lower, right, below the leaf, so that the RF can travel below the trees, but just take note, right? If it's too low, people can actually reach and tamper the AP. So just take note of that. Now, for if you need to do point-to-point mesh where you need direct, so point-to-point mesh needs to be direct line of sight for it to work, right? So in the event that, for example, AP wanted to connect to AP, but you can't do that because there are buildings blocking it, there are trees blocking it, or maybe it's a large hill or a mountain or something, you can actually do point to multi-point. Right? You can do point to multiple where you have AP2 here, you point to AP1 and then to AP3. Right? This is something that can be done to overcome this situation. Now, in terms of antenna, to get great Wi-Fi coverage or fast mesh links over outdoors, the antenna must be cross-polarized. So all Aruba outdoor APs, even our indoor APs, right? Some indoor APs are cross-polarized. So what cross-polarized means is that, let's take this as an example. The red wave, right, this signal here, which is being propagated, is called the vertical polarization, whereas the green wave you see here is horizontal polarization. So in a nutshell, the AP, the receiving end, needs to have vertical antenna to receive the vertical signal, and it also must have a horizontal antenna to receive the horizontal signal. So remember, the receiving antenna and transmitting antenna pattern must be the same. All right, take note of that. Now, so Aruba directional and omnidirectional antennas are polarized, all right, with V pole and H pole. Vertical polarization and horizontal polarization. And we do not recommend you to use non-Aruba antenna. Please, if you are going for an external antenna, go with Aruba's certified antenna, right? Our own brand, right? We cannot promise the performance if you were to go with third-party antenna. Having said that, my recommendation is to go with Aruba AP, which has built-in antenna. So we have two models within the Wi-Fi 6 series, right? The AP 560 series and the 570 series, which has built-in antenna. Please use those models because it makes your deployment so much more easier. We have built-in antenna with omnidirectional and directional antennas for your choice. So try to go with those models. So give you an example, like the benefit of having cross-polarization antenna. As you can see, the blue line here, all right, when we compare with antenna, which is vertical plus vertical, that means you have, for example, two antennas, both antenna is vertical and vertical. Over a longer distance, the bandwidth drops very low. As compared to a mixture of horizontal and vertical antenna, the bandwidth is much more better, as you can see here. Right? Give you another example, right? Over a longer distance, same thing, all right? A vertical and a horizontal and cross-polarized antenna, the bandwidth is much better over a longer distance, as you can see here. Because you have both mixture of two different types of polarization. Now, mesh topologies. So there are a few types of outdoor topology. One way is, of course, the very simple one. For outdoor client coverage, you have outdoor AP mounted outside, and the outdoor AP is powered up using a PoE powered wired cable on your access switch, similar like how you deploy indoor. Next up, if you need to do mesh, right, or point-to-point, point-to-multipoint, there are two terminology that Aruba uses. We have the mesh portal, where this is a wired AP which connects to the internal LAN network. And then we have the mesh point, which you put it at a different location, right? A further location where you provide connectivity to the extended network over 5 gigahertz. So point-to-point, the terminology of point-to-point is simple. Two outdoor AP connect to each other wirelessly over 5 gigahertz. So that's point-to-point. Point-to-multipoint means a single mesh portal will have multiple APs connected to it over a mesh link. And then multi-hop mesh means you have one mesh portal, and then you have a few mesh points connected one hop to another. So how does outdoor client coverage look like? So have a look at this diagram. It's pretty straightforward. It's no different than how you deploy indoor Wi-Fi. So you have an PoE access switches with a wired cable, plug it into that outdoor AP, and then outdoor AP will power up and then start broadcasting, similar to how an indoor AP works. So this should be very straightforward. Everything the same like how you do indoors. Point-to-point mesh link. Now, point-to-point mesh, you have a mesh portal plugged into an access switch provided PoE, and then you will build a mesh link over 5 gigahertz radio, right, to the outdoor AP. So now, take note, the APs are dual radio, so the 5 gig will be used for the mesh link, and the 2.4 gigahertz will be used to provide client connectivity. So maybe you guys might be confused, and maybe in your mind you think that, oh, Robert, I thought you mentioned 5 gig is much better for client usage, is less interference. Yes and no, but today we are talking about outdoors. In outdoors, we don't typically see a lot of interference with 2.4 gigahertz, like in the beach or in the jungle. I don't expect a lot of microwave in the jungle and so on. So that's why it is okay to use 2.4 gigahertz for wireless client connectivity. Stick to 5 gigahertz for the mesh link because, first thing first, it's the cleanest spectrum and you get faster bandwidth over 5 gigahertz. Right. So same thing, right? If you want to extend the network, build the point-to-point mesh, and then this AP, which is the mesh point, can plug into a wire switch and then plug in a CCTV camera, for example. Right? You can actually extend the network over to another wired network over this mesh link. So imagine you have 2 buildings over here. Point to multi-point. So point to multi-point, how it works is that you have a mesh portal plug in over a wired switch here, and then multiple APs will connect over the 5 gig mesh network to the mesh portal. One thing to take note, remember during our yesterday workshop, we talked about hidden node problem, where clients cannot hear other clients. Same thing to here, all right? If, for example, if this AP and this AP are too far from each other, right? Too far from each other. And I'm connected to this AP and you are connected to this AP. If my phone cannot hear your phone, that means there is a hidden node problem. And then you will get hidden node issues, right? And the performance will become very bad. So just take note of that. Don't put the AP too far away from each other. Make sure that all APs and clients can hear each other, right? So let me just move forward. Oops, sorry. So yeah, so with similar to point-to-point, right? Mesh point-to-multiple can also extend to a wire network to give you added connectivity on the other end. And in terms of the performance, if there are too many APs doing point-to-multiple to the mesh portal, the performance will drop. Remember, they are sharing a single 5 gig radio on the mesh portal, right? So all these are sharing the bandwidth. So just take note of that. Try not to do it too much. 3 is just nice. Now, single channel multi-hop mesh. So we can do multi-hop mesh. An access switch with this is the mesh portal. And then you can do multiple hops, all right? For example, like this. But take note, every hop you do, the mesh link bandwidth typically drop to half. All right, every hop you do, the bandwidth drop to half. As you can see here, 400, 200, and 100. Now, on paper, we can do up to 6 for instant AP, and I think it was 8 for a controller-based solution. But we strongly recommend you don't go beyond more than 3 or 4 hops. Because remember, every hop you go, the performance drop quite drastic, as you can see here. So try not to do too far away. The best, all right, if you can go 1 hop. If not, go with no hop as well, right? I will always prefer wired, but just take note of that. Now, another way that you can do to overcome that hop problem, and you want to provide 5 gig and 2.4 gig wireless connectivity, and don't have to worry about the mesh link per hop cost, is to do the mesh and then have another AP connected over wired to this AP, right, back to back. That means this AP will provide 5 gig and 2.4 gig connectivity to the users, right, back to back. But take note, don't put these two AP too near to each other. Right? The AP needs to have some distance between them, all right, up to 0.5 meter, right? 0.5 meter separation between these two. Else, if they're too near, they will self-interfere among themselves. And take note, this is not supported on Aruba instance, right? You need to use it on controller mode. Now, so this is a two-tier outdoor design, right? This is the hotel building. You have AP over here. It can be an AP567 or AP577 with a directional antenna. So you do a 5 gig mesh, and then, right? So remember, consider the Fresnel zone. The AP below it needs to have clear line of sight, right? Everything clear, no obstruction. And then from the pole, you can have a wired cable plug in to this AP. So you can provide 2.4 gig wireless coverage to the ground, and you can do point to multi-point to, you know, for example, to these 3 APs here, right? Which over 5 gigahertz, over 5 gig, and then they can provide client connectivity over 2.4 gigahertz. Now, going to multi-tier design, you can do, right, from here to here, do a mesh link, all right? So point to multi-point, and then another mesh, or we can do a back-to-back, okay? From this mesh point, wire cable up to another AP, and then we can extend it, the mesh, to additional hops, so that you don't have the bandwidth drop substantially as compared to this mesh to here and then to here. Right, so this can be done. So just giving you some example of tests that we have done for point-to-point communication. So from AP367 to 367, these two are our AP with built-in directional antenna. This horizontal line is the bandwidth, vertical line is the distance. So over the distance of 1.2 kilometers, we can hit roughly about plus minus 210 Mbps. Right, so it's pretty good, right? Over 5 gigs of radio, right? 200 Mbps over 1.2 kilometers. So AP365 is our omnidirectional outdoor AP. Same thing, right? Bandwidth on the vertical plane and horizontal is the distance. For MacBook Pro, transmit and receive at about 500 meters, we can get about, I think about 40 to 50 Mbps of traffic. So meaning that if I sit 500 meters away from the AP, right, I can get about 20 to 30 Mbps of traffic, which is pretty good, quite far away. But take note, all right, these are maximum distance. Try not to go to maximum. I'd rather go to maybe somewhere 50 meters, right? Give them decent bandwidth 50 meters. And take note, this can be done provided that it is clear of obstacles. It's super open, super clear. If I stand 50 meters away, I can see the AP, right? Then you can get this kind of bandwidth. If there are trees, there are bolts and something blocking it, or a hut, this will not work, right? So just take note of that. So AP565, our Wi-Fi 6 omnidirectional antenna. In general, for an open space outdoor, we can cover about 100 meters radius, right? Radius 100 meters. Take note, so in terms of deployment, deploy at least 4 to 6 meters above the ground, right? Above the ground. And when I say 100 meters, I'm referring to clear space. If there are trees, there are some hut or something, right, blocking it, like a building, cut down to half, right? Say 50 meters of coverage. Just take note of that. So in terms of mounting, right, we can pole mount it or we can wall mount it, but we have different type of mounting kit, which I'm going to show you later. Right? We also have ceiling mount as well if you want to do it as ceiling mounted. But typically outdoor is either pole mount or wall mount. Wall mount is quite common, especially if it's near a swimming pool, where we mount it near the toilet or the bar. Right? So in general, if you do not need overlap, you don't need it to cover each other, we can generally cover 750 meters using 3 access points. Not a problem. But if the hotel requires some overlap for redundancy, in case one AP were to fail, then you will need 5 AP to cover the same distance, right? 5 AP, so that you have some overlaps. Now, for AP 567, one of the AP that a lot of our partners and customers love, but for outdoors, they like to use directional antenna, like for the swimming pool or for the beach area. With this AP, it's a 90 by 90 degrees sector-based antenna. So with this on the side, right, on the side, we can cover about 30 to 40 meters, right, left and right side, but 30 to 40 meters wide. From the wall, we can cover to a Wi-Fi client about 200 meters away. 200 meters is pretty far. But again, you know, these are tested using a MacBook or a laptop which has strong receive sensitivity. Just try to cut it down to maybe 50 to 100 meters, right? So because this is a directional antenna, please try to mount it higher, right? At or below 7.5 meters is fine, right? For every 5 meters you increase above 7.5 meters, you need to down tilt the antenna about 5 degrees, right? Just down tilt it. For 567, we typically mount it on the wall or on the pole mount so that you can actually aim at the direction that you intend to cover. So with that, the AP567, right, covers side to side about 35 meters and up to 200 meters away. But of course, these are maximum. Try not to go to the maximum, all right? Try to be conservative. Try to go about maybe half, 100 meters. So if you want to do some overlap, this is how you do it, all right? You put 2 APs to cover, you know, 75 meters. Right. So yeah, remember 2 APs to cover 75 meters if you need some overlap. So these are some of our mounting kits that you can use for all these mounting kits are metal. They are very solid and ruggedized, which is designed for the outdoor harsh environment. So for our APs, which has only directional antenna, we recommend using this mounting kit, which is capable for wall mounted or pole mounted. Right, so we have the short arm or the long arm. Like typically, hotel would like to use the short arm because it looks nicer. If it's the long arm, probably it stick up too far away. But generally for performers, the long arm is better because you're putting the AP further away from the wall. Because if you put the AP too near the wall, then half the signal is gone, absorbed by the wall, right? Now, for our APs, which are directional antenna, built-in directional antenna, we recommend to put it wall mounted. And for example, this one, which is fixed position, or a mounting kit, which can do where the mount is articulated, where you can aim up or aim down, so that you can aim where you want to guide the signal to. So Wi-Fi 6 and outdoor, what gives? So how do Wi-Fi 6 benefit outdoor environment? So some of the challenges, right, with outdoor deployment is really the longer range, right? If it's very far, you want to cover a large amount of areas, then majority of the time, the dominant use is 2.4 gigahertz. The data rate typically tend to be low because you're too far away. That's why the bandwidth becomes so low. Sometimes the design is bad because there are trees and buildings blocking the Wi-Fi. And of course, hidden nodes problem. You deploy too many APs with mesh and they're too far apart, right? And then you have hidden nodes problem. So now with Wi-Fi 6, right, it helps to solve most of the problems with Wi-Fi 6, right? So to allow us to have better data rate over a longer distance, Wi-Fi 6, right, get better gain over Wi-Fi 5 because it has this feature called I'm not sure if this is a feature, but it has a longer guard interval, right? That means that the time it takes to time out a particular packet becomes longer. That means because it takes longer for the traffic to travel to you at a longer distance. So we have a longer guard interval so that those traffic, right, do not get dropped. So these longer values are one of the benefits, right, for moving to a font type longer OFDM symbol. Right? So with OFDMA, I shared just now, you get better efficiency for low rate transmission. But for small packets, it becomes much more efficient. We talk about uplink OFDMA and uplink resource scheduling from client to the AP. Right? So we kind of solved a little bit about hidden nodes and collisions. BSS color with problem with the dominant use of 2.4 gigahertz, right? We mitigate co-channel and adjacent problems, right? And increases the cell throughput. Now, some best practices and caveats. So when you go and do site survey, and remember, site survey is very, very important when you do outdoor. Go and site survey, look at the surroundings, know the environment, validate whether do you have line of sight, and know who owns what, right? So if you want to mount your AP on a pole or on the lamppost, try to know who owns that lamppost, who owns that street lamp, who owns that building, right, where you want to mount that outdoor AP. Because when you need to plan, you can't just simply mount it on someone else's property, all right? So just take note of that. Now, when you do site survey, survey both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz at the client level. Separate the heat map, all right? Now, point to point, use 5 gigahertz. So go and survey the area and check the 5 gigahertz coverage in that area. Take many pictures, right? When you go outdoors, take pictures of the area where you intend to mount and the surrounding of the area. And if you're doing planning, right, simulated planning, go to Google Earth, build a KMZ file, right, to check the coverage area so that we can see from a satellite point of view, right, or a bird's eye point of view, the coverage area that you intend to cover. And then use Aruba's 3D outdoor planner. Right? We have an outdoor planner for free, which you can use, which is available online to do soft planning. Or if you have Ekahau, go ahead and use Ekahau. And we also have outdoor MIMO validated reference design. So this is a document that we created where you can actually go and read out more on our best practices on outdoor deployment. So let's change gears a bit and check out some of the examples of bad Wi-Fi install. So if you notice, this is actually our older model, the AP275. And one thing you may notice is installed upside down. It's upside down. So very weird. I'm not sure why this person is going to install it upside down. So this is wrong. Like when you install the AP upside down, the RF signal is going in the air. I don't think it's strong enough to cover passenger in the aeroplane, but you actually need to cover it down, right? Clients are all down. So aim it down. Don't do it upside down, right? And another problem is because the mount here, the mounting kit and the AP, you notice there's like the cover below it. When it rains, water will stuck into it, and there are no holes for the water to come out. And when the water starts to accumulate, right, it will degrade the metal or the plastic over time. It will eat into the chassis. So just take note of that. So another bad deployment is this outdoor AP in enclosure with this outdoor antenna cables. So this mounting is done behind a jet engine bay. Right? This is a jet engine bay, right? Very interesting, jet engine bay. And these are the antenna. You see that the antenna melted like cheese because the jet engine test bay is very, very hot. When it's on the jet engine, it's so hot, it actually melted the antenna. See, it melted like cheese here. So the mounting area is ideal for the client. The client loves the location, but the hardware just can't take the heat. So just take note of this, right? Don't take note of it. If it's too hot, the place is not suitable to install your outdoor antenna over there. Next up, all right. If the area that you want to put Wi-Fi has a lot of microwaves, right? Take note of it because you see this amount of microwave. If you turn on all these microwaves during lunchtime, the Wi-Fi is unusable. So all these microwaves will interfere with your 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, maybe even 5 gigs as well, because there are so many microwaves here. So just take note of it, do a survey, and just watch out for this non-Wi-Fi interference. Now, another bad example of a bad install. So this is an AP, right? An outdoor AP with a single antenna. So if it's a single antenna, then that means one radio is missing. So you see, one antenna, then maybe it's only either 2.4 or 5 gig. So it's missing one radio. Secondly, it is mounted on a slanted roof or slanted ceiling. It is not straight down to the wall, to the floor, right? So to deploy AP with omnidirectional antenna, it needs to be aimed down. It needs to be aimed down properly, all right? Same goes with here. you notice that all these omnidirectional antenna, they are aiming at something, all right? So omni antenna are not magic ones, right? If you have watched Harry Potter, you don't take an antenna and aim at people, right? It doesn't work that way. So because the antenna is aimed this way, the coverage is actually up and down versus doing it at like a donut shape, aiming at the bottom. So the antenna actually needs to aim down, not aim straight. So just take note of that, right? You don't aim at where you want to do it. This is not directional antenna. These are omnidirectional antennas. So now another example, so these are directional antenna APs, right? AP with directional antenna. If you notice, this directional antenna are aiming at the sky, which is wrong. You should aim it down to where people are connected. So don't aim it at the sky, right? You can't let the birds or whatnot use the data for you, all right? Aim it down, right? Aim it down, aim it properly. So one thing that's why I discourage you guys not to use external antenna, right? Though all these are external antennas, right? I don't recommend to use external antenna. Try to use AP with built-in antenna. So we have outdoor AP with built-in antenna, be it omnidirectional or directional. And that makes it easier for you to install and troubleshoot, right? And it also looks better. So I'll give you an example, right? One of the installation. What happens is that the cable, the RF cable, there is a bend, right? There's a bend. What happens that when you bend the cable, there will be a lot of signal loss. The performance will drop very badly, all right? So if you were to use an AP with a built-in antenna, you will not have this problem. So just take note of it. And secondly, for you guys as partners, when you do installation, if you use AP with a built-in antenna, you don't have to worry about installing two different devices and then installing the RF cable. It's just a single device. Next up, some of our external antennas are not sealed. They are not sealed. For example, they are not sealed. At the top part, they are not sealed. And they do not have holes, right? They do not have holes for the water to come up. So when it rains, water will contain, like it will keep the water, like water catchment. So be careful on the antenna, right? Check first what type of antenna you're using outdoors. But going back to my recommendation just now, if you're using outdoor APs with built-in antenna, you will not have this problem, right? So with that, that's the end of my presentation and the end of the workshop. I'm open to answer questions right now before I pass it on to the server team.